Hello and welcome to another episode of French Ear Trumpet. I'm Andy from AJ in France and Colin from French Countryside Life. We come together once a week normally if we can and discuss stuff that we find interesting or talk to people that we think will be interesting. And this week we are really pleased to have Glen here, who is an expat who lives in France. And we'll get onto that shortly, where he's come from and all that kind of stuff. But I just want to say that we've got a couple of comments that in the video last week from last week's video, which I just want to touch on because they're going to be answered, I think, in this week's episode. One from John Rodley Batten 4577 says, how easy is it to move to France? Because I've watched a couple who bought a house and they couldn't get a visa to live there full time because they didn't have enough money in the bank. So we actually did an episode with Robbie where he moved from the UK, and he also has done some videos on his channel, which is really good channel for that kind of stuff. So we'll put a link in the description for that. But we went on when we did our chat with him, he went through some of the things for the UK. But having said that, we now have Glen. So Glen, where are you from?
Excuse me. I moved here I spent most of my adult life in Boston, some time in New York, but I'm originally from Texas, but went to school up in the Northeast and spent my entire adult life there.
But now you live in France.
And now I'm in the southwest of France in the Aude department, just outside Quillon. I like this area a lot. I know France fairly well from prior travels. And I know the Paris area really well, but I didn't want to live in Paris. And through a couple of clients that I've had down here in the southwest part of France, I drew a triangle starting with Toulouse and down to Perpignan and over to Carcassonne, and figured out this is the area that I want to look in. And it kind of ended up in the dead middle of it.
Okay, so why did you pick that area?
For me, it's somewhat of a personal preference, but I spent a lot of time as an adult on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, and it's known for its light. You know, it's a peninsula that sticks out about 60 miles into the Atlantic Ocean, and it's like someone's arm is crooked like this. And I was out here at the very tip in what's known as Provincetown. The light in Provincetown is phenomenal. A lot of artists like that area because of the light. When I came to visit this area of France, the first thing that struck me was the light. It's very, very similar to the Cape.
Interesting.
And I had looked at some other areas a little bit further west, deeper into the Pyrenees, and they're beautiful. I mean, there's probably no place in France that's ugly. The entire country is beautiful.
It is.
But there's a difference in the light, and I thought it was darker and colder, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And a friend of mine that, lives in that area made the comment when she got out of the car here the first time she came to look at this property with me. She goes, the light here is so different. And I went, yeah, that's right.
There you go.
Wow, I never heard that as a reason why they picked a specific area. Normally, it's something like schools or stuff to do. They like skiing, maybe, or I don't know, whatever. But because of the light, I've never really heard that before.
And the people here are really very, very friendly. There's a large expat community here, not just from the U.S., because there is a fair number of U.S. individuals here. There are a lot from the UK, but just right here on my street, I've got Germany, Uruguay, Switzerland, Belgium, Denmark, all represented within a stone's throw of my house.
Any French?
And there are a lot of French.
So just in preparation for this, I did a little bit of research, and apparently the number of Americans moving to France post-pandemic has tripled.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Some of the reasons given in this survey were exceptional high quality, affordable healthcare system.
I would say that's number one for many people.
Yeah. The next reason was a sense of safety. Apparently, gun violence is 30 times worse in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And family life was also given as a reason for Americans moving to France. So family life, in that, what I mean by that is that the whole society is set up around spending time with your family, being with the people that you love, and it's not the live to work that it is, in the US and certainly in the UK. It's the work to live.
Exactly. The quality of life in France, and I can speak, specifically to this area, is phenomenal. Where you're not getting up in the morning and rushing off to the office, and you get up, you meet people, walking your dog, going down to the local cafe for your coffee. You make friends. I can attest to this, is that you go to a cafe just to have coffee, but when I first got here, I didn't have the Wi-Fi set up in the house yet, so I would go to the cafe, bring my laptop, and be checking email and doing stuff, and then you end up in conversations with almost everyone sitting around you.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know is, oh, you're bumping into them on the street somewhere else. You recognize each other's face, you have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an instance, there was a couple I've met, a much older couple than any of the three of us. And I kept bumping into them on market days, on Wednesday mornings and Saturday mornings. And this went on for like the first month I was here. And then the fourth week, the wife walked up to me. She goes, we keep bumping into each other, so we have to be friends.
Yeah, that's nice.
And they invited me to a party at their house 2 days later.
Outstanding.
And it just kind of mushroomed from there. I met all their friends, and they're from the Netherlands.
Okay.
Originally.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
so one of my questions is, I'm really keen to know the differences between living in America and living in Europe. So it's too big a subject to just go straight into, but one of the things you touched on, and is a major factor for one, is healthcare.
Yes.
I don't even know how it works in America, other than if you're not insured, it's incredibly expensive.
Correct.
Other than that, can you just give me a brief, a couple of points, major points that are different between France and where you were in America?
Here in France, once you obtain your carte vitale, and it's not really quick getting that, as you may know or remember from when you guys were getting it. But once you have your carte vitale, their healthcare is really easy. You present your carte vitale, it covers everything except a small portion, and then you can have your top-up insurance.
Mutual.
Yeah, the Mutual, which once you have that, pretty much everything is covered. And once you hit the age of 65, which sadly I have to admit I just hit that.
I don't believe that for a minute, Glen. Not for a second.
I know you're not too far behind, Colin.
I'm getting there. I'm catching up.
Is once you hit 65, many things are covered in full between the Mutual and the carte vitale.
Yeah.
In the US, until you hit 65, you have your healthcare insurance, usually through your employer. But then you have a copay that you have to pay outside of what the health insurance covers. At 65, you automatically become eligible for Medicare, which is the government health program, but it does not cover everything at all. You have to have what's known as Part B, I believe it is, Part B or Part D, which would cover anything else you have, but you still have a copay that you have to pay out of pocket.
Okay.
And if you don't have health care through your employer, then you have to pay through Obamacare, which is good because it makes it affordable. But most of the time, health insurance on your own privately is outrageously expensive, and many people just can't afford it.
What are the waiting times like, or waiting lists like in America for your average Joe?
If you go to a doctor,
Yeah,
for a doctor appointment,
yeah.
depending on if it's a specialist or a general practitioner, you may wait a week or so. You make the
Okay.
appointment, and then in an emergency, yes, you can get in quickly, but usually it's going through an emergency room at the hospital or one of those standalone clinics, which are actually very expensive. They serve a need, but it's very, very expensive to go through one of them. And then they'll just, they'll take care of you, but then you need to go see your primary care physician after that.
And what happens with prescriptions? So by that I mean, let's say you have a long ongoing condition, nothing serious, but you have to take regular medication, like diabetes, for example, or I don't know, thyroid problems, something like that. How does that work in America? Do you have to pay that yourself, or does the insurance cover all of your prescriptions?
The insurance will cover part of it. I'm a type 2 diabetic, and it's borderline. And that's just been in the last couple of years. Your health insurance will pay part of it, then your Part B insurance if you're on Social Security or Medicare, and then you have to pay that copay. And in some instances, your insurance company will no longer pay for the difference. You'll have a huge premium outside of what your insurance will cover for a copay. The insurance company that I was using, right after I moved here, I ended up with received a letter in the mail that said, your diabetic drug will no longer be covered by your health insurance. Oh, okay.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's really sad.
That would explain why the biggest reason that Americans gave to move to France is for the exceptional high quality of
the healthcare system here is amazing.
healthcare
Earlier
system.
this year, I had a foot injury. So my primary care physician here in Expat, and she sent me on to a specialist in Carcassonne because, it was just, she thought it was something that needed care outside of her world. And so I ended up in Carcassonne, and I actually ended up in the hospital for a couple of weeks because I had to do some minor surgery on my foot. And it was just the most amazing system.
Yeah.
The people were friendly. The medical staff was great. Everything worked smoothly. I got there, got to the hospital. They checked me in. 2 weeks later, they let me out. I had to do follow-up appointments with the surgeon. But everything was, at that point, I had private insurance because when you go for your visa, you have to have healthcare insurance outside of what you would normally have in the United States. So I had to buy a personal insurance policy. Pretty much everything was taken care of. And then when my carte vitale arrived, everything's been taken care of.
So just quickly, because this is, I read this on some of the forums, expat forums and the like. So decided that when you moved over here, you're gonna have to take extra health insurance, and that is specifically to cover all of your medical needs while you're in France, up until the point where you get a carte vitale.
Correct. It has to cover all your medical needs and repatriation in case of death to send your body back to the United States because they want you to stay here, even if you're
That's
dead.
interesting. That's interesting. I didn't know that bit.
Yeah.
So can you give us an approximate in between or average figure that you would expect to pay? Because that is a question that's asked an awful lot, and I've seen an awful lot of different valuations on that.
Wildly, aren't it?
It really depends on your health, because you do have to answer a questionnaire, and then depending on what some of the answers are, you may have to have some additional tests done. So it'll run anywhere from about $1,000 a year up to $6,000 or $7,000 a year for the healthcare insurance. I ended up paying about $1,300 because the medication I have to take for the borderline diabetes is very mild. So I didn't have, a high premium, but you have to have that when you apply for your visa. It has to be in your packet. And not all of the private insurance are recognized. So you need to make sure it's one that is recognized by the consulate.
Did you take out was it your insurance with an American company, or did you get it with a French company before you moved?
You can do either one, but I used an American company. And I did a lot of research and talked to a number of them. And I just answered that question for some friends of mine that are actually considering a move over post-election. And I gave them all the contacts that I used and said, reach out to these. Your situation is going to be different than mine. So, get as many as you can.
So, okay, that's interesting. There is a big difference then in healthcare provision in the US compared to Europe. I mean, for us coming from the UK, paying for anything medical wise is, well, certainly when I was growing up or up until the point I moved, was just never heard of. There's no cash machines, there's no card machines, nothing. You just turn up and then you just get seen. Although
Eventually
it's not particularly good, but it's completely free. So everybody does get seen, and especially with urgent care as well. So that's really interesting. I find that quite fascinating.
So there's another fact that are uncovered. So in 2023, more Americans received their first-time residency cards than Britons for the second year running.
Yeah.
They received what card?
Their first-time residency card. So that would be your carte de séjour.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So, as I say, so in 2023, more Americans received their carte de séjour than Britons for the second year running.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Well, it makes sense if you think about it, because now coming here from England is exactly the same as the US requirement-wise. Before Brexit, we could just get in a car or on a plane or a boat or whatever, just come here and then just live here and don't even tell anybody. Yeah, it was amazing. So now we're in the same boat, if you like. But there's, I mean, there's I don't know, 8 times more people in America than there is in the UK, or 6 times, something like that. So obviously they're going to be way more people. But this is going to be one of the questions: do recent events like the COVID pandemic and the new president, for example, do you think
that a new president
on the amount of people coming over, or what's your thought on that?
I will say yes to both of those reasons. COVID, the mindset for a lot of the country in the within the US, a lot of the country, a lot of individuals didn't think it was real. I'll leave it at that. Okay. Those individuals they referred to it as, a scamdemic and rather than a pandemic.
Okay.
The new president-elect, I think there's a lot of concern, and no matter what you say, there's going to be backlash. So
You can't
I
please
think
all the
that's
people all the time, can you?
I think that's gonna. I think we're going to see a large influx of people looking to relocate. Maybe not to France, but France is a popular country for relocation because the healthcare system is so good and the quality of life is good here.
Yeah.
In the last 5 days, whatever it is, I've had numerous inquiries from friends and acquaintances. What do I need to do?
Mm.
And many were looking at that in advance during the whole election cycle this past year. What if? Friends of mine in this area who are in the real estate industry have noticed an increase in inquiries, via online inquiries or phone calls, people looking for real estate. And, real estate in France compared to the United States is a lot more affordable as
Okay,
well.
that was going to be one of my questions. How does the price of, the houses and apartments, how does that compare with America?
France is a lot more affordable. You're going to have that niche market in the, chateaus or manor houses. That's its own little bubble.
Yeah.
But for, the average person, real estate here is a lot more affordable. There is a mindset though, and this actually happened to me during the purchase process, where a lot of people are so used to buying and flipping real estate in the United States to make money.
Yep.
Buy it
that's
low,
what
sell it much higher. And, that doesn't happen here in France. Real estate industry here is a lot more regulated, and they're surprised at what they can get. But I know of individuals who have been caught in a situation where they're bidding on a property here, and there's really not much into the bidding. You can only undercut the asking price so much. But people from the US will come in and they'll bid right at the maximum, or a seller will be working on their own and then they're not bound by real estate laws. And then the individuals that buy from the US put it back on the market 6 months to a year later for double the price and don't even live in it.
Right.
And that actually happened to me on a property I was looking at here.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the real estate agents here seem to be aware of it, and they, try to be very upfront. And the ones that I know really well, and the one I've worked with, they're very upfront. This is how the market works. This is what we're bound by. Then there's that mindset from the U.S. Well, we can do it in the U.S. Why can't we do it in France?
But France has a lot more, I guess, what the tax is like. That was it's all my questions. I'm sure you've got some as well, Colin. But
yeah, no, funny enough, my next question is pretty much the same question you're going to ask. So one of my customers, when I said that I was going to be doing this, he said he thought that there was, because of the Second World War, there was favourable conditions given to American expats in terms of tax and so on. I thought that was really interesting. I looked into it and I couldn't find anything about it other than some things that alluded to a US-France tax treaty.
I'm not aware of anything in that regard favoring the U.S. There is the tax treaty, which is good because, once we pay our taxes in the U.S., I just have to file a return here unless I have income from France. So it's kind of a moot issue regarding taxes. And I had to file a tax, even though I was only here for 6 weeks full time in 2023 with my visa. I did have to file a return with the French government.
But I'm assuming you just put money earned elsewhere, or
I leave. Yeah, I leave.
Yeah.
I have funds. All my funds are in the U.S., but I do have an account here at Credit Agricole, and I call it. I pay myself an allowance every month. I move money over to cover the utilities, living expenses. Because of what's happened this past week with the election, I may move investment accounts over here as well, depending on what it looks like will happen there.
Interesting.
But the tax treaty is great, and it was simple. I went to the Impo Bureau in Limoux and sat for an hour with the gentleman that runs that office. I have to say it was probably the most informative meeting I've had with any government official here in France.
What was that you said, Andy? Sorry to interrupt you, to Shimon.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah. So Andy's got this theory that in every department, there's one person that knows what they're doing and can actually do something. But to get to that person, you have to go through 32 other people.
But once you get
Exactly.
to that guy,
Once you get to that person, you're sorted.
Exactly.
I had to go through a couple, and then I was talking to like the second or third one with the same question about how do I go about doing this, and the individual said, "Okay, we can make an appointment for you. Can you come in on X date at X time?" And I'm like, "Absolutely. Let me have it now." And it was a few weeks away. Drove over to Limoux, met the guy, sat in his office for an hour, literally an hour, because he had his hour blocks. But he went over everything. He showed me the documentation. He actually went online and showed me how to do it online and let me play with it online in his office.
Wow.
It was like, learning, by actually doing it. And I'm really happy with what he did. I actually sent him a thank you note.
Wow. Nobody sends the tax office a thank you note.
I have found
He's probably got that brain got this for, I imagine.
When I left the hospital in March after the couple weeks that I was there, and the staff was great, and that was right before I saw the Impo guy. I sent the director of the hospital a thank you note via email. I had his email address. And I said, everything was great. The staff was great. The care was great. The only thing I didn't like was the food, but, we get over that because no hospital has good food. And they're dealing with lots of different dietary restrictions. And then I sent one to the Impo guy, and both of them responded with, this is great. We really appreciate the feedback.
Yeah.
Conversely, if something bad happens, I won't send anything. It's not worth the energy to do it because they get that all the time.
Yeah.
But if someone does something good, I want them to know it because it gives them a boost in their day.
Yeah, absolutely. And specifically for those kind of places as well, they don't normally receive good feedback. They generally don't.
What's interesting is that in my previous life, doing the work that I did, I spent a lot of time around Americans. I used to do a lot of work for the US Embassy in London, and also with the insurance company. There was a lot of American clients. I've been to the US once, went right across from the West Coast to the East Coast, and I was surprised within London. And it seems like there's almost like a two-layer society. So you got the people that are well-travelled, well-educated, have a worldview, know that there's other countries, and then there's everybody else. So I'd talk to people in when I went to America, and there was quite a few people that I came across that had never been more than 50 miles from where they was born.
Very right about that.
And I thought about it, and I sort of thought that in a way that's an example of the success of the American dream, because everything that person wants is within 50 miles.
That's I've never looked at it like that, but
So, you know, they're quite happy with everything that they need is within that radius.
They're in their little box
Yeah,
and they're very happy. Don't let that box crack open.
yeah.
Because then things get
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
I see.
But,
It's so interesting.
Yeah. Also, what I found amusing with the Americans is that they don't swear very often. So, so when those Americans came over and spent time around the guys that I was working with, they just let rip because they was off the leash, and they could tell the most the worst jokes, and have the bluest language, and no one was going to be offended.
It's something I've never noticed. Anyway, so okay, just a quick question. Where you live? Do you live in a house or get an apartment, or just give us
Here
a
in France?
just quickly run us through what you've got and how you came about it. How did you find it and that kind of stuff?
It's a house. It's a historic property. It's the oldest part, which is where I'm sitting, was formerly a tower for the old Dax family fortress. It was one of the guard towers.
Wow.
It dates from the early 1600s. And then the property was expanded in the 16th century, and it was expanded in the 18th century. They almost tripled the size of it. It's very vertical. Now there are houses built to my east. But I'm at the end of the row, and then it's 4 stories. It's very interesting as an architect to look at it because there are no right angles here.
Oh, right. Okay.
Trying to do work on it is interesting
No, that's
because
right.
there are no right angles. I mean, I was trying to wallpaper a room and then the wallpaper just did not work. So
Just
it all
went
came
down
out.
to a little tiny strip in
You end up with these like wedges coming down, and then wedges up at the top. The only place where it's level is the floor. But it makes it that much more interesting. I found this through a real estate agent, and one of the things that I think is difficult for everyone from the U.S. or maybe from the U.K. or other countries when they come to France, particularly in the U.S., there's a multiple listing service where you can work with one agent and they can find properties for you everywhere. Well, that doesn't exist here. Agents are responsible for properties in their territory, their region.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to end up working with a lot of different agents. If you're looking in multiple communities, that's just the way it is. Nice thing is you make a lot of connections, and almost every agent I worked with over a multiple year period, I'm still in touch with. This particular property, I initially saw it online, reached out to the agency. In the meantime, I'd already made an offer on another property, and then that fell through because of the whole scenario I mentioned earlier with someone working behind the realtor's back. But came to look at this property, and this property was actually in person better than the ad online led it to be. I was quite surprised. Considering that parts of it are 600 years old, the prior owner had updated all the mechanicals, so that was really good.
You mean like plumbing, electrics,
Exactly.
services, that kind of stuff?
Heating, plumbing, electric, appliances had all been updated during the 10-12 year period that they owned the house. So for me, it was easy. I could just move in. But as an architect, I may see the actual house, but in my head, I see something different.
Right. Yeah, potential, I guess. What you could do with it, maybe.
Exactly. I It is a historic property. In World War II, it was damaged and it was spoken of very specifically in the diagnostic report. And I've tried to explain the diagnostic. You guys know what the diagnostic is, but for someone coming from another country, the diagnostic gives you some information on the house, but it's not, it doesn't go into checking, making sure the appliances and everything work like we would do in the United States.
It's not structural either.
No, not at all. They point out if there's some deficiencies you need to know about, but so the diagnostic was very specific that in 1949, it talked about everything that was done to the house post World War II. And there had been a battle here during World War II. There's a train line that runs through this area and had been used by the Germans as a supply line coming from the coast in Perpignan in Spain to central France, or going towards central France. And so this area got bombed and the house was damaged. So when they rebuilt it in 1949, all the ornamentation from the 18th century was stripped off.
Okay.
I was very lucky to find a photo of it in the library taken in the early 20th century, pre-World War I, and saw what it had looked like at that point. And major differences are on the very front of the house where most of the damage was. So I went to the Monument Historique and applied for permits to do restoration, to restore the balconies and the French doors that were closed off and regular windows put in, so that I can restore all of that. The side that there's a pedestrian street on the side, which is a staircase that goes into the old fortress, because the back wall of the house, which is like right there, dates from, I think, 1200.
Wow, that's pretty old.
Is where my house is the old medieval section of Expat. There's the fortress, there's the church from the 16th century, and then on the other side of the church, at the very top of the hill, is the old Dax family chateau, which is now all in ruins. But it's, there are tourists that come through here constantly. And this was one of the entrances to the side of my house, but it's a pedestrian staircase now. I call it the Spanish Steps of Expat. Because in the summer, there's just like tons of people, and I've got, doorways and balconies on that side of the house that still exist. And I'm trying to find an iron, I don't know what you call it. I'm just going to blank on that. But to recreate the balcony rails that are on the side for the front.
Ah, interesting. So that must be a big difference from America to France, is the kind of a medieval history, and before that kind of stuff. I suppose you don't have anything like that.
If something hits 50 years old in the United States,
that's it.
So no medieval castles, no dungeons, no. Yeah, that's interesting.
As I'm an architect, but I ended up going back to school after I retired, and I retired early to get a master's in architecture with the focus on historic preservation. I know the projects I've worked on.
So this is a playground for you then, Glen, really, isn't it?
It's it's like a kid with a new toy.
Yeah.
The exterior is highly regulated. I can do anything I want to the inside, but the outside has to meet all the qualifications. And so, as I mentioned the other day when we were doing our test, I've been painting with blue paint, and I look like a character from Blue Man Group, but I did have blue paint on it. I was, getting up from painting the bottom of one of the shutters, and I kind of fell into it. Both out of my face was painted blue, and I looked in the mirror and I was like, okay, I hope Mineral Spirits will take this off. But it's fun to do it, but all your colors you use on the outside have to be approved.
Oh yeah.
Anything that's done. The windows even had to be approved. But fortunately, the prior owner had put all new windows in.
So that's not your your problem. It's interesting that, because even if you're, I mean, I'm assuming you probably have to coordinate everything with Bâtiment de France. Is that correct? And that's for the people who live in the UK. That's pretty similar, I guess. National Trust, English
National
Heritage,
Trust,
something
yeah,
like
English Heritage, yeah.
who are responsible for all the medieval buildings, all the real historic buildings. You know, if you had one of those, you probably need to get permission to do anything. So any material you use has got to be approved, any colors, any finishes, so types of finishes. So like if that house never would have had a rendered finish, then it's not going to be allowed, and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, that's really, really interesting. Now, you just touched on a point there. You are an architect. Do you do any work in France or not? Do you still work, is what I'm asking.
My visa doesn't allow for me to work in France. I consult, people ask me questions, so I can do the consulting piece of it. I just can't earn income through a French company.
So that's interesting. So that brings me on to the type of visa that you've got. Is it a retirement type visa or a long
Correct.
stay tourist?
It's a long stay retirement, the VLS TS1,
Okay.
which
So,
is your residence permit. And then at the end of 1 year, you have to renew it. And then you can get your titre séjour at that point. And then you can either renew it. This is where I'm a little confused, because I've heard from two different sources, both government sources actually. I can renew it every year for 3 years and then get a 5-year visa, or you have to do it for 5 years and then apply for a 5-year visa. In the
right.
meantime, you can be looking at applying for residency as well and getting a citizenship, which is my ultimate goal, is to get citizenship.
Right, so there are different types of visas, but that brings me on to another point. How's your French?
Right, so before you answer, Glenn,
Go on.
before you answer, so there was a comment on the last French ear trumpet. I'm just going to read it out, and it does actually refer to that. So it's from Stephen Colantonio 5350. He says, I wanted to share a personal reflection regarding population movements between the United Kingdom and France, particularly in the context of Brexit. Interestingly, many Britons supported Brexit to fight immigration and regain sovereignty. However, today we are seeing an increasing number of British citizens coming to settle in France. The problem is that most of them don't seem to be making much of an effort to fully integrate. The language barrier is a glaring example. They do not master French and do not always seem to try to learn it, as if France could be perceived as an extension of Britain. I wonder if you have observed this phenomenon, or if initiatives are planned to encourage linguistic and cultural integration. This could undoubtedly facilitate cohabitation and strengthen mutual respect between communities. So
I'm assuming from that, that the guy posting that is French.
He certainly lives in France, I would guess.
Yes. Okay, we'll say that he's a resident of France, or she is a resident of France.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Glenn? What's your take on that kind of thing?
My feeling is that you make the decision to move to a different country, you are obligating yourself to learn the language, become part of the community. I had a basic understanding of French through my grandparents. I have a lot of it up here, but if someone puts me in the spot and says, ask me a question, it's kind of like,
it just goes, doesn't it? Nothing.
But I can walk out the door in the morning with the dog to go for a walk and go get a cup of coffee. And as I walk down the hill, I'll see my French neighbors and I can have conversations, but I'm not suddenly having to think about, oh my God, how do I answer that question? It just comes out. So I am actually trying to get over that fear, because I don't want to make a mistake. And I have made some mistakes, and fortunately they've all been comical when it's happened.
Yeah.
And I have a 80-plus-year-old neighbor. I consider her, if I had a French grandmother alive, she would be it, because she's amazing. And I don't know if you ever remembered did you ever watch the TV show Bewitched?
Yeah.
Oh,
back
yeah.
in the 60s.
A long time ago now. No.
Okay, there was a character called Gladys Kravitz who knew everything about everybody. She was like the town know-it-all. Okay, that's my neighbor across
Yeah.
the street. But she's a sweetheart, and you know, I've made some mistakes, and she'll come up to me. She goes, "Oh no, 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 no," and then she'll tell me what I should have said. And sometimes I make the mistake, and her husband Robert is standing there, and I look at him like, "What did I just say?" And he just laughs about it, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is horrible," because I don't know in some instances what I said. They ask me a quick question, and I'm like, come up with an answer. But I'm taking 3 classes a week, 2 conversation groups, and then a grammar group. And
You
I
really
also
mean
visit-
it, Ben?
Yeah. I can read it without a problem. Have to look up a word here or there. I can write it fairly well. It's just getting it from here and out the lips.
Yeah. Can I just bring you back to something that you said at the start of this when you were just talking about your grandparents? You said
Yes.
that you got some of the French from your grandparents.
Yes. Both grandparents spoke French.
Spoke French. What were they French
French,
or
they were French
immigrants?
descent. Yeah, they were French descent on my mother's side.
Okay. Did you spend
On my
much time there?
father's side, my father's family's Isle of Man.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's different, isn't it?
And my mother and my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, when my brothers and I were little, they would speak French, like Easter, Christmas. They didn't want us to know what was going on. Like what you're getting for the kids for Christmas. My brothers and I are picking it up all this time, and we're like, we know.
Yeah. So would they have come via Canada, like Quebec, and all the French immigrants that came into that, or
Yes.
yeah, because you said you spent most of your time in Boston, which is up on the northeast coast of America. So I would guess that they would come down from.
Yeah, and neither of my parents. I was born in Texas, and neither of my parents
Okay.
were from Texas.
Right.
They both went to school in Texas, and that's how they met in school. My mother grew up in New Orleans, and my dad grew up in the northern
It's
part of
another
Nigeria.
French-speaking area, isn't it? New Orleans?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's Cajun French, which has Spanish and Indian influence.
Yeah.
And here in Occitanie, the Aude, Hérault, Pyrenees Oriental region, this was part of Spain at one time, and it's got a lot of Catalan influence.
Right.
So you can read something, but depending on if someone was born here or we'll say closer to central France, they're going to be the little nuances with pronunciation. And I was in a conversation with a woman at one of the conversation groups recently, and she kept saying something, and I was like, it doesn't sound right. I don't know what that is. So I asked her to write it out, and she did. And I said, this, and she goes, no, this. But then I realized some of the accents that she was using are actually the Spanish accents.
Because you're close to Spain, I suppose.
Yeah, I can be in Barcelona in 2 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. Right.
Andorra is about 45 minutes away. Spain, an hour, depending on how you drive it.
So this must be weird being an American where literally, especially from Texas, you could drive all day, all the following day, and you probably won't even leave the state.
Yeah.
And then you come here and you could reach 2-3 countries within a few hours.
Yeah. Well, see, New England is the same way. I could leave my house in Boston and I could be in Montreal, Canada in 3.5 hours. Texas and France are about the same size, roughly the same size.
That's insane.
I never knew that.
Like when I go to Normandy to visit someone up there that I've done some work for, I usually break it up into 2 days. Otherwise, it's like a 10-hour drive.
Yep.
And they're outside Alençon. Yeah, Alençon.
Alençon, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I drove up to. Well, there's another YouTube channel that I watch. about Chateau de Pernon. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but it's near Poitiers. Poitiers.
Poitiers.
Poitiers. And I drove up there for Journée de Patrimoine 6 weeks or so ago. And that was, that was like a 6-hour drive to get there. And it's, in Texas, I would have still been in the same state at that point as well. So,
Poitiers, that's central because that's actually, I'm going to say 30 minutes from where my other house is. And that's 3 hours from here. So it's 2 hours from here, probably 3.5 from where Colin lives as well. So it's long distances, isn't it?
So you're in Brittany, or?
Yeah, my main house is in Brittany, between Rennes and Nantes, right in the middle.
Okay.
And so very far north. Don't have as much light as you down. That's for sure. I woke up this morning, I couldn't see the end of the garden. The fog was that bad.
But it's cold there.
All week it's been foggy. It's not cold, but it's just foggy. It's weird. Very strange. Anyway,
are you close to the coast?
No.
Okay.
No, we are literally where I live is the bottom of Brittany. It's actually the bottom of my mum's garden is the Pays de Loire. So you're literally on the border.
Okay.
You could be either, really. So it's right in the southern port.
I'm only 45 minutes off the Mediterranean. The beach is there.
Yeah, all right. Okay, yeah. Well, thanks very much for coming on, Glen.
And one of the advantages to this area is 45 minutes to the ocean, and it's an easy day trip, to go hit the beach. In the winter, 45 minutes to hit the ski areas for skiing. It's a huge cycling area, and I used to do a lot of cycling. So, Toulouse is an hour and a half, Carcassone's an hour.
From reading all the groups and stuff online, that seems like a very popular region for specifically American and actually Australian expats. Have you met any Australians?
There are quite a few Australians.
It's interesting.
And that probably exists in other communities, but there in this area is a group called English Speakers of Keon or the Ode or something to that effect, where everyone can connect and you can exchange information. Because I will say it was a big help because I arrived here and people had already made contacts and knew who to call to get different things done. And you can just post on the Facebook page, and you can Google within, or not Google, but search within those pages and find answers before you actually go out and ask a question. Like, does anyone know a good electrician? Blah, blah, blah. And you can search and find, a list. And that's very helpful. Other friends of mine that I've made through that that group of people is, don't say too much because we don't want more people coming over here.
Right, that was going to be another question I had. How do you feel about this many English-speaking expats coming to a not small area, but the similar kind of areas? And to put it in perspective, where I am here, I only know, and I know of a handful of British and American. I think there's one American couple that within 20, 30 kilometers of where I live. Nobody here speaks English. Everything is completely French. It's like if you imagine the middle of the French Brittany countryside. If I went to the supermarket and I couldn't speak French, I couldn't get on. I couldn't exist without that. The doctor does not speak English. The supermarket, the restaurants, nobody. It's very rare that anyone speaks English. But where you live, Colin, there's a large expat community, and it's somewhat adapted to that in that you could probably walk into most big stores or most places and
find someone,
find someone that speaks English. And that doesn't exist where I am. And that's one of the reasons I like where I am. It forces me to become more French, not only in what we speak, But you touched on this briefly earlier on, the culture differences as well, because there are loads. And I find that I think, that if I mixed with a lot of people from Britain, because I'm from there, then I would just carry on being British with occasionally interacting. But I'm keen to change the way that I live to fit in to the French culture. So I don't. My question, if it was going to be a question on that, is how do you feel about lots of your fellow Americans coming to that kind of area where you are?
You know, if they want to come here and they're intent on doing so, and I do have several friends who have purchased houses here since I've been here, that's fine. You know, everyone's going somewhere for a reason. I did not know that there was such a huge expat community here when I was looking. And sometimes, to be honest, sometimes I just want to be with the French population. And so I think I've reached a happy medium in that the French population here in this immediate area, I've made some huge inroads in being accepted by them because I make the attempt. You know, sometimes I make a lot of grammar errors and say the wrong thing, but I go out and I play pétanque with them. And that was a huge thing for me a year ago when I played pétanque here first time 6 years ago, I think it was, one match. And then the Bulls went away. And then when I got here last year, I just immediately started playing. And then some of the gentlemen here in Expat, in the immediate surrounding area, who are all in our age bracket, asked me one day, I was walking the dog and they said, would you like to join us for pétanque? But they were speaking in French. And I was supposed to do something with some English speaking friends that night in Keon. And I called them and said, I can't go. I can't do it. I have to stay here because I've been invited to play pétanque with these gentlemen.
You only get asked
a
once.
wonderful way of, accepting me into the community. And now, we play pétanque, a couple nights a week. I go into Keon and play with English speakers a couple nights a week. And then some of those nights in Keon, I actually play with, it's a mixed crowd of French and English or English speaking. I moved to France to be part of France, and that's important.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think that's pretty balanced approach, and I think that's quite good. I think you're going to see an influx of more Americans. From what I've been reading online, there's a lot more. I did a quick look. Google says that since the election, that the Google search for how do I move to France has gone up by something like 1,000%.
Yeah, and the other Google search that's just gone through the roof is how do I move to Canada?
Is it really?
That Canada would be very convenient for a lot of them, or Mexico, because I know a lot have talked about moving to Mexico. But a lot of friends have asked me, what do I need to do to move to France, or just to EU in general? And a lot of couples I know, I should say a lot, 6 couples that I know, 2 of which were direct neighbors in Boston, and then the other 4 couples are now in the Lisbon, Portugal area.
Lisbon, right? Nice. I do like Lisbon.
And it's interesting because one couple in Lisbon, they've been there for several years now. They owned the loft directly across the hall from me in Boston, and they were here July, I guess it was, for a visit. And I hadn't seen them since their 3rd child was born. They had 2 when they left Boston, and now they have a 3rd one. And it was like they got out of their car and it's like we were back in Boston, and just connected immediately, caught up on the last few years. And I love that, and they want to come back here. And the wife is an artist, and so I've introduced her to a lot of artists in this area because this is a large arts community in this area.
Because of the light, do you think?
What's that? Because of the light.
Exactly. Because of the light, yeah.
Exactly. And there's a lot of performing artists, musicians. There's 2 opera singers, one from the UK, one from US, a conductor, and I can't remember where he's from. I've met him once, and that was just in passing.
Well, that's very arty, isn't it? That's
Bohemian. That's the word we're looking for.
And because the weather is such, it's a huge outdoor recreation area too. I can go kayaking in about 30 steps from my front door because the Ode River runs right below my house.
Yeah.
Kayaking, cycling, skiing, mountain biking, all of that, hiking.
So to sum up, Glenn, how would you describe your lifestyle since moving from the US to France?
Better.
Can you offer any advice to any American, specifically American, because that's where you're from, who wants to or thinking about moving to France? Where would they start, and what's the best way to go about it, do you think? Just a short
research. And I just had that conversation a couple of days ago with a former neighbor. Make your decision. This individual is talking about a couple different locations in Europe. And my advice was pick a couple of them at most, and then decide, are you going to continue to work or are you going to retire? Because they're at that age that could probably go either way. What do you really want to do? And then research it. Just start looking at real estate online. Start looking at the lifestyle. Get into some forums, where they can ask questions in those specific communities, such as through the English-speaking pages, because I don't know if they speak foreign languages or not, but at least to get the perspective of someone that has relocated from another country here that does speak English, and they can ask, what is your opinion? My interests are X, Y, and Z. What is that something I can do there?
Okay, well, that's interesting. Research.
Exactly. To just say I'm going to up and move to Europe, fly over, buy a piece of property. It's not the right way to do it. Look at the areas as well. I spent about 5 years looking for the right location.
Big move, I guess, but that...
I made a couple trips over during COVID, which was great because the planes were empty, but
that's it.
Probably quite cheap.
But I did because you didn't have to worry about crowds at that point. And when I found this property, I saw it, and then I made a special trip over to look at this, and really glad that I did it.
Excellent. That's really good. Unfortunately, we've run out of time.
Yeah.
Oh.
Would you believe that, and we say this to everybody, that hour goes in fact, it's over an hour, but it goes in no time at all.
Just whizzes by.
Exactly.
And I've got so many more questions. I really wanted to ask about how you get on with DIY stuff compared to America, and cars and vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, I've still got a list of questions.
I know.
We'll do a return trip if that's all right with you, Glenn.
That's fine. Yeah.
I reckon what we should do is, so if anybody's got any specific questions for Americans moving to France, or any general questions about Americans in France, pop them in the comments.
It's a really
and
good
then
idea.
we can have a chat about it between all three of us. And then if we get enough questions, then we'll come back and do another episode on the questions if everyone wants to do that.
It might be interesting to get Glenn and Rob in.
Yes.
Because there's the two visa application scenarios, and there's post Brexit for us. The US is always
the general election.
Yeah, but I think we'll probably get more information on how the new president-elect will shape the future of America as well. So we might get more information. So there's a lot of things we can look for.
Yeah. So I think
ironically, I do watch Robbie's channel too. So
There you go. So I think that's on the cards, as they say.
Yeah.
All right. So if you're both happy, I'll wrap up.
Yeah.
Just one quick question, because I've had
Certainly.
friends asking me, well, what's going on with the vlog? And I said, well, I'll ask the guys if it's okay to let people know about it. So
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyone.
We need all the help we can get.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I told them I would find. I just left it generic. I'll get the link and let you know.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
No,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I know what the link is, but
Put it on social media, on any way you can, really, because there's some really good information that helps all sorts of people. And there's also episodes where me and Colin just talk complete nonsense for an hour, so that's quite entertaining.
But Andy, are you on social media?
Other than my YouTube channel, no, I'm not. But that's it. But I do have my other channel, as does Colin. Although I haven't made a video in about 6 months. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's been a while.
But
And one of the
there's
reasons that I got attracted to Colin's channel is we're about the same age. Okay, we both retired within like a month of each other, and then you just you popped into my YouTube feed and like, oh look, there's this guy that's got the same haircut as me, and we're about the same age, and we're kind of like in parallel worlds in two different places.
Separated at birth, that's what it is. Separated at birth.
Dagenham and Texas.
You know what I mean?
But it was just very, his channel's interesting. Andy, your channel is interesting, and well, that's a topic for another day about the DIY stuff. So
yeah, I think I'd love to do that. That would be great from my point of view. Anyway, carry on, Colin.
So, thank you so much for watching. And if you're still watching, well done.
Absolutely.
So, if you'd like to give the video a thumbs up, that'd be great. Maybe think about sharing it on your socials, as we just mentioned, and press the notification bell so that you know when there's new content. And all that leaves to say,
mind how you go.
Don't forget, no, that's for the other channel. Don't forget to think about subscribing if you're not subscribed already. That's what I was going to say. So, all that leaves to say is goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from them.
Thank you, gentlemen. Been a pleasure.
Goodbye.
Ciao.